These were carved out of wood, these letters, okay? Later, letters that were going to go into the newspaper or other publishing press, the publishing press for a magazine or a book, or they were made out of metal. A lot of them were made out of lead. It was very soft, and then they would make them for that as the newspaper, whatever the article was, somebody'd sit there and type out those letters, and then they would form into molten lead and harden. It was pretty wild. And then they'd melt the whole thing down, do it all over for the next newspaper, because newspapers change so much and it would take a lot of time to pull out an A and an E and so on. But at any rate, the way this is done in the past, these were wooden letters cut out so that, remember, our high relief, we know about printmaking. These are relief letters. So the ink is on the top part, on the high part, and then it was pressed into the paper. That's the old-fashioned print press. The printing press was a relief press to start with, but then other developments happened. These are two timetables that you're seeing here, one in 89. That, I don't know exactly. 1989 it says. And then it was redesigned in 1990. This might have been older than that, though. I'm not exactly sure. Supposedly this one's clearer and easier to see. I don't agree. I don't really like this layout, but that could be also because as an older person, I get used to a certain way of reading things. I get used to a typeface and a layout that's familiar to me. So that's very possible. But I thought that was kind of interesting that they were calling this a much more cohesive and an easy way to read it. But that's why things changed. You notice the letters are bolder and kind of chubbier here, and they get spread out here. Lettering can get spread out, and it can get taller. It can do a lot of different things. This right here is layout. Now this is a typical template for a book or magazine. I have actually seen, too long a story, but I have actually seen layouts where they have a couple of the photos. Maybe the photographer submitted the work first, but the guy's still writing the article, and they just write like for placement only, blah 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 blah. It'll just say like, the quick brown fox ran, jumped over the lazy dog. It'll just have a bunch of text here because they need to see what it actually looks like before they put the real text in. So they'll put things in place using this template, but it'll get refined a couple times before they actually publish it. And if you look at our book, the way it's laid out, you could kind of understand what that means. We have a really wide border on the left and right, toward the edge of the page. We have a pretty big border there. So that's kind of interesting and different. Okay, along with typeface, you have to consider the images, which is important. So when you get into a complex, combined word and image type situation, like a magazine or a broadside, these are the old, the broadsides are the old one sheets, like you would just have a leaflet, or maybe it might have been folded in half. Brochures, you probably have seen like some of those, like the Watchtower, or some of those ones that people leave behind on a bus bench or something. That's kind of what the old broadsides were like. But we now have posters, brochures, newspapers, magazines. That's evolved from the broadside. Okay, here's a big advertising campaign. You can kind of see the wrinkles in the paper. So this was probably posted, this particular one, on either a wall, like a construction site where there's board, or it could be up high on a billboard. And it still works, even though we have a few wrinkles in here, because the design's really potent and effective. And this also was connected to a animated action advertisement on television. So that was a really strong way to have brand identity if you have the same image out there on paper as you do on the television or online or what have you. Okay, Shia Day, huge advertising, developed a lot of advertising, a lot of big client list. They're one of the big ones that exists still today. But this is a silhouette. You can see the product really clearly. You can see the expression of how people feel using the product, and then we have the Apple and the iPod right there. Really potent sort of a visual, and that's important. So this is an example of words and image evolved